Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're in the Mig-19P and we're doing an updated cockpit familiarization video. So for this video, just to split it into sections, we've got left wall, left console here, the front instrument panel here, gun sight, bow, and right wall and right console. Starting on the left wall as far back as we need to go, we've got this guy here. It allows us to set the altitude for the radio altimeter warning in meters, as you can see, or we can have it in K, test, or we can have it off. Next, our pitot tube selection, main, or in case of a failure, emergency, secondary. Next, oxygen shuttle valve, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, left turns off, right turns on. Next, our O2 dilution. Do we want our O2 oxygen supply mixed, if I can get it to work, or 100% oxygen? Next, our suit. Do we want it in automatic mode? This is oxygen supply. Neutral, which will keep the last chosen automatic mode, or, if I can get it, off. Flap configuration. Landing mode, full down. Takeoff mode is about half down, a third down. Fully retracted for flight, and we can reset the switches there. Up to the top we have our radar control panel here. So starting here we can have anti-jamming on or off. If we have anti-jamming on, it's going to mess with our sensitivity of our radar to help cut through jamming. We've got our built-in test here. We've got a gauge here. It can show two different things, and let me show you here. Depending on the position of this switch here, we can have up, where it can show essentially the voltage of the radar, B, the pressure of the radar. Would you like to go into a bit further with that, RC, that explanation?
When the switch is set up, it shows the voltage. Normal voltage would be 210 volts. And when it's down, it shows pressure. And that would be, normal pressure would be 130 kilograms per centimeter squared. And the scale is the same on the gauge.
Roger, times 100, so up to 300 volts, 300 kilos per centimeter squared, thank you. Next is our lock-on button. We can only lock a target, track a target, if we're turned on there. Master mode for the radar, off. Standby for warm-up, and on. We've got our... we can adjust the elevation, if you like, or pitch of our horizon, like we can in the F5, interestingly there, manually. I can't get it to turn, but it does work. There we go. With the radar as well, do we want the display to be configured for night or day in terms of brightness? And finally, a manual brightness knob as well. Next, we're on to weapons. We've got rocket salvo control here. Do we want one rocket per pod to be fired at the press of a button? Do we want 4 rockets per pod to be fired? Or do we want all of the rockets to be fired? Rocket counter and display here. Green light here will show if rocket pods are on, set up and ready to fire. And then per pod, we've got shown here lights for which rockets are available and ready to fire, 1 to 8. And the lights here, whether we're on night mode or day mode in terms of intensity. Next, regards the ASP5 gun sights and weapon selection, do we want to aim and fire guided missiles, the NR-30 twin 30mm cannons, bombs, or rockets? Regards aiming mode, do we want it to be optically based, where we would, for instance, enter target wingspan and that, and use the sight for aiming like that optically, or radar aiming? This knob here is modelled. And finally here we've got manual and auto, so for bomb drops, whether we drop 1 bomb per press or both bombs per press. Normal starter switches for starting left engine and right engine. Air start switches for left engine and right engine. Back up again, we've got, we're going to describe as the ARU2V. What this does is allows us to control long arm or short arm movement of the rear stabs. So for long arm, I forget which way around it is actually, but one of them gives us more movement regime in the stab than the other. We're talking about the horizontal stabs here. In auto, it will automatically choose long arm or short arm, and in manual, we're going to be able to manually choose whether we want long arm or short arm. There's a warning button down here, interestingly. It doesn't say what it does in the manual, so it doesn't do anything as far as we're aware. We've got a drag chute, which we can deploy here, cover off and ping, deploy. Over on the left hand side is a bit strange place to have it, but we have here the Arc 5 radio compass, so this is for navigation, unit, and we can select the band in kilohertz on this side here. Next, onto the throttle quadrant, left and right throttles for left and right engines. You bind them to your, your actual physical throttle, and then move up and down, obviously. Here is, we can turn this guy here, and it's on a kind of rheostat, and this, it does the ranging, manual ranging for the ASP5 gun sight. So we can change the symbology there. Ranging. On the side here, there are some buttons like, for instance, air brake switch. They're not actually working at the time of making this video. I can't click any of them, but they may work at some point. Next, to control the engine power regime, if we want to go into max power with afterburner, we've got push and hold this guy here, max power. And if we want to restrict ourselves to nominal cruise, as a mil power at the most, we've got this guy here. Moving forward, radio, very simple. We've got 6 channels we can use. They can only be set in the mission editor in terms of their frequency. We've got a master volume control. We've got a squelch disable, so we can stamp out the noise, or no squelch disable, and a master mode here for audio transmission or for radio compass. Next, how do we want to control the ailerons? A, hydraulically, or B, manual, or off, so I should say, manual reversion. Next is our aileron trimmer, and we can simply trim left and right. Next, our horizontal stabilizer control. Do we want it to be controlled primarily by hydraulic system here, or we have a electric reversion there in case of hydraulic failure? Next, let's move up the wall and to the left. So we've got the ability here to disable the afterburner on the left engine. Up is on for all of these switches. Off will allow afterburner. Disable afterburner other engine, allow afterburner. We've got left and right here, engine oil cutoff. That cuts it off. That allows it. Next, we've got power to the fire extinguisher. That will allow power to the fire extinguisher. Next is the energizing the engine start system. It's currently on. Turn that off if we wanted. Next, we've got anti-skid brakes on currently. Next, we've got cockpit heating currently off. Next, we've got the fuel pumps for fuel tanks 4, 3, 2, and 1. Currently, all of them on. Next, communication signal flares, white, red, green, and yellow. And to energize the system to fire the flares, we can turn it on there. Next, we've got lamp test here for warning lamps. So we've got the warning lamps here for fuel tanks 2, 3, and 4 here. And we can test the lamps like that. Kind of same thing down here for the fire warning. We can test the lamp there. If the fire extinguisher system is energized, we can fire the fire extinguisher there. And we've got master fuel cutoff for left engine, master fuel cutoff for right engine, and one little guy up there is the Canopy front de-icing system, anti-freeze as they called it. Next, cockpit control, we can depressurize or pressurize, and then we can unlock Canopy, which will then allow us with left control and C to, after a small delay, to open and close. The only other thing to point out on this side is a little space there, and if we go back, in fact, to our mission editor, click on our plane here, click on additional properties here, if we were to mount the SPO2 Sirena RWR here, save and go back in, ta-da, we now have a rear-facing RWR. So it's unenergized, or we can energize it. This just shows it's energized, and if a hostile radar lock was detected behind us, this is rear-facing, then this light would show here. Let's move on to the flight instrument panel. Up on the left eyebrow here, we have which NDB station we are interested in. So this is going to be for approach. We've got far, or we've got the near beacon. Brake chute. So open this up, and this will deploy the braking chute. I made an error earlier on. This one here actually detaches or jettisons the chute. It doesn't actually deploy it. Next, emergency jettison for the bombs and the fuel tanks. Over here, emergency jettison for the rocket pods. And gun arm to arm the guns, push and hold left. push and hold right. And we've got an indicator light we'll go and look at a little bit later on. Next is oxygen pressure here in kilograms per centimetre squared, and oxygen flow indicator, the little guys below. Gear handle, we've got lockout here, so we can lock out the up position. Unlocked, up, down, and neutral. Next is an aileron neutral trimmer switch here, so we know if aileron trim is neutral for takeoff because the light will show. And a test thing below, we don't think that little button's modelled. Next, gear and other surfaces indicator panel, so 3 green down and locked. And we've got red here if they are obviously retracted. We can test the lamps here, by the way. Gear retracted here. And we've got flaps deployed indicator here and air brake deploy indicator there. Exterior lights, nav light brightness off, 100%. It's kind of difficult to get to, but there are 10% and 30%. Nose lights off, taxi, landing. Left instrument panel, we've got nose wheel brake here. It can essentially be off in the vertical position or on in the horizontal position. Now, we're not convinced this is actually a brake. The manual doesn't tell us. We think it might actually be a lock for the nose wheel gear, but we're not sure. Any thoughts on that, RC?
No, I mean, it makes sense that it would lock it for takeoff and unlock it for taxi.
Yeah, but it says brake here, it says brake in the manual, so there we go. Next, radar. We know the radar is emitting if this light is here is on. Also, selector regards altitude. If below 2,000 meters, we want position 1. If above 2,000 meters, we want position 2 for the radar. Next is a radio compass here. So this guy here is a radio needle, and it's going to be driven by a system that we'll see on the right panel. We have a standard compass rose around the outside and a course selector here. If you want to know more about navigation in this vehicle, we have a navigation tutorial on it. Next, if we move right, this glows if our pitch trim is neutral, similar to the aileron trim work there. Next is our ADI, our attitude director indicator, otherwise known as artificial horizon. It shows us our attitude, our pitch and our roll and whatnot. We are in the middle here. It's 20 degrees up, 20 degrees down. The Earth is blue, which is a bit confusing, but that's how it is. I suppose it's not that confusing. It shows us our roll as well in degrees here. So with 30 degrees left, 60 degrees left, 90 degrees right, left, and the same with the right. As well as that, we can trim in terms of pitch here. And of course, with like most ADI functions, we're going to have to be able to cage it in certain scenarios, so we can cage it with this guy here. As well as that, we have a yaw slip gauge, mini yaw slip gauge here, which is just included in this instrument. Next, down here, we have our barometric altimeter. Large needle around the outside, hundreds of meters, barometric. Small needle inside, kilometers, or I suppose you could say thousands of meters, same thing. We also can, like with any barometric altimeter, adjust the pressure. And you can see the absolute selected pressure there in millimeters of mercury. Next, we've got the erector or the aligner for this our compass here. The only use of it we know so far is that pressing it for 3 seconds during startup will align or slave it to the magnetic compass. That's the only function we found of it so far. Its actual name is needle alignment. Speedo, which is actually a really interesting speedo. It has one needle showing IAS, one needle showing TS, true speed, which is a really useful function. And it is in hundreds of kilometers per hour, showing our limit there. Next is a marker light or a beacon light for the inner and outer beacons. And again, this is obviously related to this guy here. If we're over a beacon, then we're going to have this guy showing. Next, we have a gauge here. We've got a yaw slip gauge again here, primary. Again, as ever, our task will be to try and keep the ball inside the two little gates there in terms of yaw slip. And we've got a turn indicator here, left to 45 degrees, right to 45 degrees up here. If we go down and left, we have our radio altimeter in meters. Next, we have our aviation clock here, multiple function, various functions of these buttons, but essentially we can use it as a clock and we can adjust it, and we can use it as a stopwatch as well, and we can set and reset that. I did get it going, there it goes, look, ping. Next is indicators for left and right engines, which will show if the engines are in emergency air restart mode, and we'll have another video on that coming up soon, show how to use that. Finally, in fact before that, we've got the white stripe here, and that is to align the stick so that you know when the stick is in neutral in terms of aileron. And light here, little red light here, which I'll have to get RC to do.
That red light is your disconnect radar light. When the radar is overheating due to prolonged use, it will light up. Roger.
Right instrument panel. This here is a gauge showing the current position, condition of our, if you remember, we had our ARU2V long arm short arm system on the left wall. This is the indicator for it, showing our current condition. Here is a light showing that the system is in condition for takeoff and landing, and if the light wasn't on, we have the ability to test the lamp there. Next, VSI, vertical speed indicator. We are climbing or diving by this many meters per second. Next is our Mach meter. This needle will show our Mach, obviously, and we've got our transonic warning needle there shown in red. Next is a fuel gauge. It's actually quite an exceptional fuel gauge. What we have along the top here is times 100 litres, and I think this is only, which tanks is this relevant to, RC?
Fuel tank number 1 only.
Only fuel tank number 1. So I think the way this works is fuel tanks 4, 3 and 2 will drain, and then 1 will drain, which I think is your largest tank, which is what we'll show here. So it's just something to bear in mind. And the cool thing is, down here we've got a little sub gauge, and that is showing our fuel flow in hundreds of litres per hour. So that's quite clever. Next we go up is the tacho for the engines, shows the RPM of the engines, times 1000 RPMs. We've got a left engine needle and a right engine needle. Next is the military power lights here. Now we've never seen these working. Apparently according to the manual they're going to show when the engine left and right is at military power. We have never got it working. We may just be using it wrong, but just bear that in mind. Next we've got EGT. We've got exhaust gas temperature of left engine, right engine, and this is shown in hundreds of degrees Celsius. Next, 2 warning lamps, left and right generator disconnected. Next, afterburner left and right indicators. Watch this and listen to this. Look at that flow meter go up.
I got the military lights.
Oh, did you? How did you get the mil lights going on?
I pressed the nominal button and brought my throttle up to full.
Right, so that's what it is. So they're limiters, right? So if you remember the nominal button down on the quadrant where it limits the regime to mil power, that is going to show when they're on. Fine. I'll see. I've got a day and light mode for instrument lights here. Brightness. Can you give me the rest of the panel underneath the afterburner lights, please?
Lights below the afterburner lights are the low oil indicator lights. Below those on the right is the 550 liters remaining in fuel tank 1 lamp, and on the left is the main fuel tank 1 empty lamp.
Roger. And then finally we've got low hydraulic pressure and system warning light here. Next we've got oxygen system altitude indicator equivalent kilometers, so up to 20 kilometers. I think that's about 65,000 feet, something like that. Next we've got our cabin pressure. Lower needle here is showing absolute in kilos per centimeter squared, and up here is equivalent altitude needle in kilometers, up to about 15 kilometers, about 50,000 feet, something like that. We've got the electric system voltage rating currently shown here in tens of volts. Down next for lower auxiliary panel, we've got on the left here, I'll do the switch first, whether our bombs are armed or inert. And if the bombs are installed and armed, then this red light will show to show that they are set with impact fuses. Next is guns. It will, if we press the buttons up there for long enough and the guns are armed and ready, they will show light there and light there, left gun, right gun. Here is an ammo counter, and we can use this guy here and this guy here to reset the counters. Here is going to show if we have exterior drop tanks, and if the exterior drop tanks are empty, then it will show a light here. Suspended loads. This is going to tell us that we are registering loads on our wing pylons, bombs, rocket pods, or exterior tanks. Left and right hydraulic pressure for wheel brakes. If I pump them, you can see them going up. It says here kilograms per centimetre squared. I assume that's times 100 or times 1,000. Otherwise, that's a very incredibly low pressure. Literally, you could blow into a balloon at higher pressure. So I'm going to guess it's times something. Doesn't say in the manual. Next is our redundancy or emergency hydraulic system. Shown here in kilos per centimetre squared. Again, it may be times 10. I don't really know. So otherwise, that's what that is. Up to the gun sight and the radar scope. This is our radar scope. It's quite cool. It's antiquity, obviously, but it's quite cool. I'm not going to explain it now. I've got a full video on it. You can go and watch that if you want in the Mig-19 section playlist. Next, regards the radar, whether we have a lock here, and here's our breakaway cue. It's something in the 50s and 60s was on the MiGs. If you get too close to use a certain weapon or too close in general, you will have a breakaway cue shown here. Regards the ASP5 gun sight, same thing. Lock here in green and breakaway cue if we're getting too close. Breakaway cue will also, pretty sure, works for air to ground application. Next, for use for the ASP5, whether we want to cage the gyro to have, non-gyro manual only, or wrong way around, to cage the gyro here to lock out the gyro, or to uncage to allow the gyro to function. Next, regarding targeting, we don't have the symbology at the moment because we don't have it turned on, but we'd have some basic targeting symbology to tell the ASP5 the wingspan of the target that we're looking for. This will work for ground vehicles as well, note. The angle of depression, now this would, in NATO planes, would usually be in milliradians. Here, according to the manual, and I'm just going to say according to the manual, this is in degrees times 10. I've never seen a plane that does degrees times 10, but that's what the manual says, so we'll go with it. That's the manual depression. Brightness for the symbology that will be up there. The symbology is on those basic, it's just a circle and a couple of bits. Next, our copper gauge. This is measuring distance, hundreds of meters, and it is regards our radar ranging. Next, accelerometer. This is a 3-needle piece here. It's going to record historical low, historical high, and instantaneous G up to plus 10G and down to negative 5G. This here is our gun sight glass that will show the symbology. And big ugly gun sight camera up there. If you don't want that, you can turn that off in the special options from the DCS main menu. Next, this front right console. Emergency gear release here, pneumatic. One click and it will turn and deploy that. Flaps, emergency deploy, pneumatic again. Regards the amount of air in the pneumatic system is modelled. It's probably a one use only. We can see a gauge here for the emergency gear deploy. Pneumatic pressure, kilograms per centimetre squared, I think. If we skip over here, we've got the equivalent for the flaps release. That is the amount of pressure for the pneumatic emergency flap release. Back up here, we've got hydraulic. This is our main hydraulic system. Pressure, kilograms per centimetre squared. Down here, back to pneumatic, our main pneumatic system in kilos per centimetre squared. Next up the sidewall, we have emergency canopy release here. A series of sidewall switches. We have the emergency radio power here. We have the emergency AG1 power here. That is the artificial horizon. Next, standard radio power. Next, beacon and radio altimeter power on one switch. Skip these two. Next, we have the stabilizer, or the elevation, pitch, electric control system power. Remember, we had hydraulic and electric. Next, we have aileron, electric trimmer power. Next, we have our radio navigation and, again, our artificial horizon power. Pitot heat on or off. I should say on in Russian planes is, well, in this plane at least, is up, off is down. We've got backup here, pitot heat. Battery on or off. Left generator, right generator, on and off. Our sight heat, ASP5 sight heater. Our radar, RP5 radar electric power. Our rocket pod power. Our left gun electric power and right gun electric power. You'll use these if you want to actually use the weapons. You'll need to turn them on, obviously. Not model, but gun camera and nose camera. Moving back on the right side, cockpit temperature control, 3-piece, cold, hot, or auto. And our cockpit pressurization lever here, ping. And we've got our ARC-5 direction finding set here, linked to, remember, a knob that you saw on the left side for the band selection. Also linked to the near and far beacon selectors that we saw. So, we've got, where should we start? Lighting on it here. I guess you can't see it in the daytime. We've got signal strength meter here. We've got master mode here, doing off. Compass, antenna mode, or loop. I'm pretty sure that only compass is going to work. I've got a full video on this if you want to look into it seriously. We can loop the aerial left, we can loop the aerial right. Pretty sure it's not model at the moment. Audio volume for your Morse code identifiers here. Lighting we've done. We've got frequency band here and fine adjuster here for the frequency selection, for finding the frequency. And we can switch here to switch between telegraph. I always get these words wrong. Telegraphy or telephony modes here. We've got our right lamp on or off. We've got our UV lamps left and right here. One thing I've learned about UV lamps is you can't just zip them on because you'll break them. You have to turn them on very slowly for reasons I don't understand. Down here we have our cockpit ventilation on or off, and a bell here, which is probably going to be various tones, but definitely our beacon tone, I'd imagine. Next, moving back, stuff that's not modeled per se, but it is here, which is cool. IFF, if you want to destruct your IFF there, boom. And basic IFF power. We can have that on and off, and as far as we're aware, that's not modeled at the moment. Next, circuit breakers. These are modeled, so be careful. Now, if you want to see what they are, they've got little plaques on them. I can't get my track IR any further back. Or you can hover and see there the circuit breaker, whether you want that system on or off. Ah, no, they're not modeled. I just saw RC. You're right. You
can hover over them, yeah. They turn green.
I guess they're work in progress then. I guess you probably will be able to turn these on and off, but you can't do it at the moment. Interesting. And to finish off the cockpit, we've got a canopy release and lock. Same as the left-hand side, but we don't have the pressurization bit there. Canopy open close guy there, instead of pressing left control and C like we did earlier. And our lollipop indicated there for our gear, which are currently deployed. So that's that showing deployed. And Mr. RC, I think that is us today done. Obviously, stick column, the buttons aren't, how am I going to say it? They move, but you can't actually click on them. You have to bind them on your HOTAS, obviously. Same with the rudder pedals, like thus. There are no toe brakes in these old Russian planes. You just have a lever that you pull like that, which is a bit awkward. Anything you want to add to that, RC?
Nope.
Hope you enjoyed that. See you later.